Welcome back to part 5 of our tuning series. Today we're going to do a shorter video that really talks about the fundamentals of PID tuning, which will be the next step in your tuning journey. So like previous videos, I'm going to spend some time talking about the fundamentals of this part of tuning, PID, and how it works so that you get a good understanding of basically what you're seeing and how to react to what you're seeing in the car, and you can make better decisions about tweaking it to get it to run right, as opposed to spinning your wheels and chasing your tail, just tweaking settings sort of randomly. So the Megasquirt has two areas where PID is used, and the first one is under EGO control. So EGO controls exhaust gas oxygen control, and it's using as its feedback mechanism your AFRs. That's the information from your wideband, sensor type, wideband, and it's going to feed back into your fueling based on your AFR table that you've set up. And so in here, you'll notice that the base map that we've been using in this series so far has got the algorithm set at simple. And what that really means is that it's already using this so-called PID control, but it's got some defaults in here. And so it's setting it for you, which may or may not be appropriate for your car. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at that. And also, the other area is under idle closed loop settings. And so far we've been using just basic. So here you can change this to advanced and you get your PID. So with EGO control, what are we really looking at? What is our target? So we look at our AFR table. And depending on where you are in the range based on the load, or the RPM, you're going to be targeting different AFRs. And this is the basic set of AFRs that came in the base map that you've downloaded, and this is usually fairly good for a Miata. Now, if you don't have a base map, you can always get it off the internet, but if you wanted to start from scratch just as an exercise, you could literally set this whole table to about 14 or even 14.7. 14 is maybe a little bit safer just because it's a little rich, and you'd be good to go from there. You could get to all this stuff based on what you wanted to do by starting at that point. And so looking at these different areas, we've got kind of the low RPM, which is really kind of around idle. And so in a lot of cars, that's going to idle at about stoichiometric, which is 14.7. And then as you get a little bit higher, regardless of load, you're going to get into like the 15s. So you want it to be a little bit leaner. This is considered cruise. And then as we get into higher RPMs towards the red line, we want to kind of richen it up a bit back down to stoichiometric, and also at higher load. So this is now we're representing sort of full throttle, and we want it to be richer still. So now it's down to the 13s. As you get into boost, you want even more fuel. So you get into the 11s up at the top here. And so this is various levels of additional boost PSI that's going to be happening. So these are going to be our targets for the EGO control. And the targets for our idle control are right here with this target curve. And so I've turned on the little chart. You can turn this on and off right here. But this shows that at a specific RPM, at a specific coolant level, you have a certain RPM that's going to be targeted. So when it's cold, you want it to idle higher. It'll be smoother that way. And as the warm-up progresses, you're going to get down to what's optimum for your car, which on a Miata is going to be about 850. So these are going to be our targets here. So what is PID or PID control? So PID is an acronym that stands for proportional, integral, derivative control. And this is a very simple way of handling a closed loop feedback system. And it's used all over the place. It is the most popular control mechanism that's really in industry. It is used for cars, it's used for thermostat, keeping the temperature constant, it's used for factories, it's used for robotics, it's used for drones, all kinds of things can utilize this system because it works. It's very effective, it's simple to implement, and basically no matter what it is, it works. Now, in a PID system, you really have one input and sort of an output. In our case, let's say EGO control, our input is going to be the wideband feedback. So whatever AFR our wideband is telling us, that's our input to the system. Then for an output, we can control the fuel. So we're going to be pushing fuel or taking away fuel, and that's our output. And then we see what happens over time as things change, and we see how closely we can get to our target, which was in the AFR target table. So a PID control system has three terms or variables, or also known as gains, that are used to control how the feedback mechanism works. And so the first one is the proportional feedback mechanism. So proportional is very easy to understand. It's what is happening now. So if you're driving a car and you're pressing on the gas and you want to reach a certain speed, then basically, what's intuitive is that if you're a long way away from that speed, say you're driving very slowly or stopped, and you want to get up to, say, 20 or 30 miles an hour faster than what you are, then you want to push the accelerator farther than you would if you only wanted to increase your speed by 2 or 3 miles an hour. So the distance between your target and where you are is proportional, is going to impact the proportionality of how much you change the accelerator pedal. So if we have a target line that's basically like this, and then all of a sudden it's up here, and then now it's going to settle out, then we're going to be going along here, and as we go, there's a little bit of a lag. We realize, oh, we're not at our target, so we're going to try to start following it up to our new target as time progresses. Oops. And eventually reach the new target. But the key is we're talking about the present here with the proportional term. If the distance between the target is far, then we adjust it harder. If it's little and we're getting close, then we adjust it less. So if our proportional gain is too little, then it starts to look like this. We're like going up really slowly. It's like pressing the accelerator really lightly, and it's just going to take forever to get up to our target, right? So we've got all this time from here to here that we're spending getting there. And what we really want is it to be really close here, like that. Now, here's the problem about stopping there. With proportional gain, if it gets too high, it will start to look like this. It'll overshoot. And then we'll have to come back down. And it'll overshoot again. It'll come back down. And eventually these oscillations will get smaller and we'll reach our target. So that brings us to the I, or the integral part. Now, the integral part you can think of as you're in the car, you're trying to reach a target speed, and the integral part takes into account the error history, what happened in the past. So it's kind of like that backseat driver, that's very judgmental, and nothing you do is right, and maybe it's that friend that's always like, thinks he's a race car driver, but he doesn't actually own a car. That guy. He's like, bruh, do you even downshift? And so he's telling you all this stuff about you're accelerating too slow, you're accelerating too fast. So what he's taking into account is all the error history, because he will not let you forget. And so if we look at that, he's looking at this and this. So all this area between the target area into the curve is what he's taking into account. So the integral portion is in effect helping to get things closer faster. And so you want that guy to shut up. So you say, fine, I am going to accelerate a little bit faster, and I'm going to reach my target more quickly, and if I err, then I'm going to come back down here. And so the result of that is going to be less of a, let me change this, less of an oscillation period, and then we're going to reach target with less oscillation, and it'll be smoother. All right, so the P is sort of the driver, proportional, and they're making changes based on how far they are from the target right now. The I is the integral, and it's looking at the past history, this stuff in blue, of how much error has accumulated, and it's either adding or subtracting based on that to reduce, to either A, get you closer faster, and also to reduce this oscillation. And then the final term is the derivative term, and the derivative term is taking a look at what the rate of change is. So as you're getting up here, say, the rate of change is going to be a line. The derivative is always the tangent to the curve. So going back to our calculus, so this slope of this line represents the rate of change here. So down here it's pretty high, the slope is high, and then up here it's starting to slow down because the proportional is getting too slow. But what the D term can do is it acts as kind of like a braking system. It starts to slow you down as you approach the target, but the rate of change basically is getting smaller and smaller. And so what that does is it can prevent you from overshooting, which can be good in a lot of cases. From an AFR perspective, it's good because overshooting means you might be going lean. Lean can be dangerous to your engine, and you don't want that. In our analogy with just driving the car and the accelerator, we're talking about speed. What that means is that you're basically rolling off the gas when you start to get close to your target, or more dramatically, in the learner's permit analogy, if you've ever either taught somebody to drive or been taught to drive and they got so freaked out by you driving that they started pulling the emergency brake, yeah, that's what D is. They're pulling the emergency brake on you because you're going too fast around this corner and you're about to skid or something like that. So D can be a braking mechanism. Now, in a lot of cases, it may not be necessary. Either a little bit of overshooting is no big deal, just because our AFR gauge is not perfect anyway, and it's not necessarily telling the whole story. Or B, going a little bit lean for a couple of engine cycles is not going to be the end of the world. So, or C, in Tuner Studio, you can define where your EGR control stops. So you can say it's active below 100% throttle, but you can change this to be less than 100% throttle and active below a load of 90%. So that means that when it's at the highest part or the most dangerous part of your fueling table, it's not even in control anyway. It's going to be a set amount of fuel. So it's not going to pull any fuel unnecessarily. And you can tune this to be, you can change this so that it's safer. All right, so how does this all go together? I like to start with the proportional term first. And so basically what you're doing is you're looking for a term that's going to give you a quick change up to the target, but not overshoot by too much. So you basically start upping the numbers until it starts to overshoot and oscillate like this, and then you back it off a little bit. So what you're really going to start looking for is, something that goes up fairly quickly and hits the target in a curve like that. So the best way to do that in the actual car is to go into Tuner Studio, go to your AFR EGO Control, and we'll set it to PID. And what you're going to do is basically zero these out so that you get to a point where with these as 0, it is going to idle at a particular AFR. It doesn't have to be a perfect AFR, just whatever you can get it to idle at. So you may be tweaking the fueling table to get it steady at something, say 14. It could be 13.5, something like that. That's fine. We don't care too much. We just want it to be steady at all these zeros. Then what you're going to do is you're going to change that target by going into the AFR table. And so wherever you are, and I recommend letting the engine warm up completely, it's going to be a lot more stable and not give you any other random variables and noise that you have to deal with, which is part of the warming up process. But once it's set up and stable, warmed up, then you can change this wherever you are idling at. Say it's around 35 or something like that kPa. And once you're warmed up, you should be around 850. So you can change this target back to 14.7, which is what it is, normally. So say you had to idle it at 14.0, then to get it steady, so you're on this cell, you just change it to 14.7, hit burn, and it's going to, that's the new target that it's going to be trying to adjust. So in your logger, you're going to want to look at what it's doing in terms of your AFR. So your logger may be set up differently, but this is how I have mine. And so AFR is a yellow line right here. And so you can see some oscillation here in this, I don't know, this is a random log that I just brought up. And you'll see a certain type of, it'll be steady on that line originally, but then when you change that target to be back to 14.7, there should be some variability, and it'll go up, like say right here, and it'll kind of, it may oscillate a bit and then return to the target. So what you're wanting to do is when you see that you're wanting to up this so that that hitting of the target happens fairly quickly, but not so much that it overshoots so dramatically and then oscillates. So when your proportional thing is too high, when the gain is too high on proportional, then you're going to see this, or it's going to be, even worse. It's gonna look crazy. It's going to look like this, just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So that's not good. So you're going to want to back it off a bit. And so what I mean by back it off is just, multiply it by about 0.8 or something like that, 80% of where you were. And you should get to something more like this yellow line. It'll be closer. Okay, so the next thing I like to add is the I term. So the I term is basically going to take a look at this error history, and it's going to try to get you there a little bit closer. Remember, it's a backseat driver. You're trying to shut him up, and so you're basically saying fine. And so what it's going to do is it's going to move this curve a little bit inwards so that it's, in terms of time progressing, it's going to happen a little bit more closely. So you can start upping the I to the point where it gets to, it shortens this distance so that the time is shorter. And also, if you had still had any overshoot, that it's reducing that and it gets to a nice steady state more quickly, as opposed to oscillating for a while and then reaching a steady state way out here. All right, so lastly, the D term derivative can sometimes be completely unnecessary. This may work just fine and get you to where you need to be without even using the D term. So leaving it at 0 can have a couple of benefits. One is that D can sometimes be affected by noise in the system. If your AFR gauge itself fluctuates a bit randomly, which actually mine does, and a lot of ones that I've seen, this is pretty common in AFR gauge. It's not perfect. It all depends on where it's placed in the exhaust. There's a few variables involved with that, the installation of those things, and just how old they are. If you've been running rich for a long time, then it may be kind of carbonized. There's a whole bunch of things that can cause that thing to be not ideally sensitive. So if that's the case, then D can sort of amplify noise, and it basically can cause a lot of like little high frequency oscillation right at the end. And so by keeping it 0, it just doesn't, you don't have that problem. However, D can be useful to help get rid of some of these overshoots, especially. And so by dampening the overshoot, it'll keep you from going lean in a particular situation, something like that. So adding a little bit of D at the end can be helpful in sort of smoothing out that graph. So to recap, proportional gain is your main driver, and if you have too little, it's going to take you forever to get up here. If you have too much, you're going to overshoot and start to oscillate back and forth, and you may never reach target actually. By adding I, you can get to it closer and reduce oscillation. There's still the possibility of overshoot, but by adding your derivative, then you can get it up and not overshoot and get stable. So, like I said, sometimes the derivative is not necessary. You can leave that at 0 and just have P and I. But sometimes it can tweak it, and you'll have to check at different stages. Idle EGO control is a little bit different than when it's under load and so on. So you need to make sure that your settings work for all those different scenarios. And so we'll be covering in the future a little bit more of the details of actually logging it, and then getting into how to make tweaks and changes based on what we see in the log. So that'll wrap it up for this. Hopefully now you can impress your friends with all your control system theory knowledge, and hopefully get your EGO control locked in and super stable on your car. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you like this, you want to see more, give me a like, share this video with your friends, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks a lot.